Picture this. You shut your laptop after a long, hard day of work and you wander into the kitchen just wanting something simple and delicious to eat for dinner. But you're just tired, you're not even sure what's in the fridge, and you're feeling generally overwhelmed. I have been there myself many times before, and maybe some of you can relate to this. In today's episode, I thought it would be fun to talk about how I learned to not hate cooking. It really has felt like 2026 is the year of analog hobbies, everything from watercolor to reading to needlepoint, and I think that cooking and baking fall within that category too. I'll share how I went from literally can't cook a thing, like scared of burning Easy Mac in the microwave, to suddenly making homemade pasta for dinner. I'll talk about the cookbooks that have helped me and even share some of my favorite simple weeknight dinner ideas that have saved me, especially while I'm running a business during the day. Whether you're looking to cut back on your monthly Uber Eats spending or you just want to learn how to romanticize cooking at home, I am so excited to talk about this in today's episode. Before we get into all things cooking, let's first do a little create and consume. So, as far as what I've been creating in this past week, as you guys will know if you listened to last week's episode, I recently celebrated my 5-year self-employment anniversary, my personal work anniversary, whatever you want to call it. So I did a whole episode on that last week, and I decided to use my brain to work smarter, not harder. And I decided to take a couple of little nuggets from that episode and package them into a mini series that I'm sharing on Instagram and TikTok throughout this whole week. So I just posted part 1 yesterday where I'm talking about how I knew it was time to quit my job, like what a couple of signs were that gave me the confidence to say, okay, if this is what I could do when content creation is my side hustle, here is what things could look like if I'm able to put my full time and effort into this project. I'll be posting part 2 later today, which is going to be all about my income streams. I'm also going to talk about the hardest moments and my proudest accomplishments, and I will also be doing a little giveaway. So I think that should probably be live by the time this episode goes up. If it is, I will link it in the show notes. Definitely be sure to go check it out and enter, especially if you're a content creator who's looking to learn more about diversifying your income streams. And then for what I'm consuming this week, I finally have a book update for you guys. I'm so relieved to be out of my reading slump. It lasted for like maybe 3 or 4 weeks where I just had zero interest in picking up a book. And now I'm like on the opposite tread of that, which is that I have been flying through books. Like I finished this book that I'm going to tell you about. I listened to an audiobook, which I think I'll talk about next week, and I'm almost done with a third book right now. So I am just so happy to be back in my reading groove. So the book that I wanted to tell you about is called Park Avenue. And in this novel, we follow Gia, who is a young, ambitious lawyer living in New York, and she gets assigned a case with basically a lot of family infighting. So this book was pitched as like Crazy Rich Asians meets Succession. It does have to do with a family that owns one of the top Korean skincare companies in the entire world. The parents are fighting, the siblings are fighting. So Gia, who is a junior partner at her law firm, gets brought onto this case and told that if she's able to secure them as a client, that she'll get promoted to senior partner, which is something that she desperately wants. And I absolutely loved the writing in this book. There are also some really interesting interludes from kind of like a breaking of the fourth wall perspective that I don't want to spoil too much, but that actually all came together in such an interesting way at the end. This was our April pick for book club, and I suggested it, so I'm hoping everyone loved it as much as I did. I'm super excited to chat with my group about it, and I actually have gotten a question or two when I reference a book club on the podcast. I'm talking about a book club that I am a part of just like offline in my life, but if there's ever enough interest, I would love to start some kind of podcast book club or maybe a book club through my own Instagram or something. So if that's something you think you would be interested in, feel free to send me a message and let me know, because I would love to kind of start tracking interest for that. And maybe we could even do like dedicated book club episodes every once in a while. If that's of interest, let me know. If it's not, no worries, totally understand. And be sure to let me know what you guys have been creating and consuming this week as well. You can leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify. You can send me an email. Yes, I do actually read and respond to emails, so you can find all of the ways to get in touch in the show notes. And with that out of the way, let's talk all things cooking. Now, first, I will say that I feel like I grew up with a really deep appreciation of cooking, but not really a deep understanding of cooking. And that's partly my own fault. I mean, I would help my mom like chop vegetables or set the table and stuff like that before family gatherings, but I wasn't necessarily absorbing like recipes and how things were done, what was going on to really appreciate the full effort that went into everything. But I have always loved food. I've always loved eating. I am Italian and Irish, and I definitely feel like, especially for the Italian side, there's just not as many like famous popular Irish foods. I feel like aside from Kerrygold butter and Guinness. On the Italian side, though, there is so much that comes from cooking and how you prepare meals and what you pass down and just the general vibe of how you grow up, you know? So while I always appreciated the meals, I would say that I really didn't understand what exactly went into them. I wasn't like picking up little tips here and there. I did not always love cooking. I learned how to make like one recipe, which was chocolate chip muffins. And that was basically the only thing I remember cooking myself from start to finish growing up. And that came more from a necessity of like, hey, there's a bake sale at school. You need to bring something, than it did a genuine like passion for cooking, if that makes sense. So that's why if you are in the boat where you're like, God, I just hate cooking, like I hate thinking of meals to make, I hate wondering what's in the fridge, I hate trying to figure out how to piece it all together and come up with new ideas all the time, like trust me, I really get it because that's where I started. And I would also like to say that I was a pretty picky eater growing up. Like we used to joke in my household that I would just eat all of the kind of white or tan foods in the house. So I would eat a lot of pasta, bagels. When we ordered from the Japanese restaurants, I would just get like shrimp shumai, which, if you know, are just like these tiny little dumplings that just have shrimp in them. A lot of like turkey sandwiches, pretzels, snacks, like in that kind of realm. And I also used to have a huge sweet tooth as a kid, which somehow I've weirdly grown out of. I talk about this all the time where it's like, I would rather eat, I don't know, I would rather have like a charcuterie board for my birthday than a cake. Like any day of the week. But like I said, my mom is a really, really great cook. And some of the things that I remember her making that I would eat growing up were like the Barefoot Contessa turkey meatloaf. I was just talking to my mom on the phone about this last night and telling her that I have a new interest in browsing some of her Barefoot Contessa cookbooks after the book that I read, which you could probably guess what it is based on that. Also, a shrimp risotto. I remember that would be like my dad's request for his birthday every year. She would also make this really delicious like orecchiette pasta with broccoli rabe and ground sausage. And there are just like honestly so many. And from everything from that to just like simple comfort foods, like when I was sick, pastina and chicken broth, like that was always the antidote, you know what I mean? And then when I went to college, you know, I mostly relied on meal plans, and being in New York, I also heavily relied on takeout. So I would kind of try to strategically, like if I was getting takeout, I would make sure that it was something I could have like for dinner one day and then reheat for dinner the next day. I was just cooking a lot of like very simple pastas with sauce from the jar, like no seasonings, literally just like pasta, sauce, nothing else. Also lived near a great halal cart. If it's still there, shout out to the halal cart on 113th Street and Broadway. That was also there like literally all into the depths of the night. If you happen to walk by at like 3 in the morning, coming back from the library, coming back from, I don't know, Mel's or the Heights, one of the bars at Columbia, it would always be there and it would be very reliable. And I do remember I had maybe like one friend in college who one time had us over for dinner, and she actually like cooked meat for tacos. And I was like, oh my God, isn't that so scary to cook meat? Like, how do you even know to do that? And she was like, this is literally ground beef. Like, it's very hard to mess up. And I still like was always scared of cooking meat and chicken, didn't fully believe that. Then when I think about like the post grad era, okay, like I've graduated now, I'm living in Brooklyn with 2 roommates. So sharing a kitchen with 2 other girls, and the fact that we all worked like 9 to 5 jobs and we're all trying to use the kitchen basically at the same hours of the day. Again, I would really just do things that like would get me in and out of the kitchen quickly. I would really rely on takeout again, pasta, like not too much changed. And then when I moved in with Andrew, that became interesting too, because we used to trade off cooking a lot more, again, because we both were working like 9 to 5 jobs. And actually, I would say most nights Andrew would get home before I did. So the fact that he used to get home first and I would roll up at like maybe 6 or 6:30 when he had been home since like 5:30 would sometimes give him a head start on cooking. So, that was an interesting experience because being in New York and being a single person, sometimes it is cheaper to just like pick up a Chipotle burrito or get takeout than it is to buy groceries to cook for one person. Like, I do think that that is something that is really hard to figure out is the portions and how much you want to make and what actually keeps well and reheats the next day and the meal prep of it all. Because once we moved in together, we did make more of an effort to actually like go grocery shopping to make most of our meals at home and not really be so reliant on takeout. And I would say that was kind of a transition for both of us to go from like being just responsible for our own dinners and our own meals to suddenly like, oh, we could pool resources, actually like buy groceries, think of a meal plan and like cook together. It seemed to make more sense. But it wasn't totally an easy transition. Not to mention, like, one of the reasons I loved living in New York and that I love living in Hoboken is the access to all of the incredible restaurants that we have. Like, I do like to eat out and get takeout and enjoy everything that's right next to us. And even figuring out the portions and everything, like, a recipe could say it's for two people, but like, Andrew, the guy can eat, especially during marathon training season, which, if you're listening to this episode the day that it comes out, we are about to head to Boston to watch him run the Boston Marathon, which I'm so excited for. I feel like we've been talking about this for so many months, and I'm really excited to like see him run and see his training pay off and all of that good stuff. So I'll keep you posted on how that all goes. Wish him luck. So I kind of felt like, okay, now that there's also someone else here, it feels like a good idea to learn to cook a little more. So I very lightly like dipped my toes in some stuff, like trying to make sausage and peppers just on the stovetop, trying to cook chicken, like bake chicken in the oven for the first time, like getting a meat thermometer because I was still scared I was going to screw it up. And I would say that was still the early stages of just like the world's most basic meals. And one thing that I will say that I still use now is like when in doubt for dinners, I do try to just hit the big three, like find a meat, a starch, and a vegetable that you can serve as just a nice thing presented on a dish where it feels balanced and it feels like there's enough food there. You know what I mean? And then we all remember what happened in 2020. The world shut down. That was a really hard time, too, for restaurants and small businesses. I give so much credit to anyone who had to figure out how to pivot that kind of business during that time. And I remember, ordering from some of my favorite restaurants like in the city, but having them send their food to the staff at like NYU Langone and just people who were working overtime, like Dan and John's Wings, which is one of my favorite spots in the city to like get some wings, get a beer, and watch a football game. They were doing that for nurses. I still just think back on that time and I'm like, that was fucking crazy. Like, how did any of us get through that? And I've been to therapy twice since 2020. So just saying, it was not without some help to get to get through on the other side of that. I think with 2020, it started with a lot of comfort food, like definitely a lot of ordering in, indulging, lots of pizza, lots of pasta, all of that kind of stuff. And then I feel like on the flip side, kind of coming out of it and having all of these new realizations and just like an appreciation for my health and like the health of my family, especially because my dad had a very bad case of COVID. Things were not looking good for a long time, and we're very lucky that he came out on the other side of all of that. But it just really kind of like shook me up and made me so much more appreciative, like I said, of my health and thinking, okay, like I want to learn how to cook and I want to learn how to cook like delicious, indulgent things, but I also, for the most part, would like to just be eating as well as I possibly could. And I am not a nutritionist, I am not a health coach. Can't emphasize that enough. And I also still love balance. Like, I'm going to talk to you about pasta, I'm going to talk to you about pizza in this episode. Basically, what that kind of did, though, was help me land in the kind of current ritual and routine that I feel like I'm in right now, which is that I cook weeknight dinners in our household Sunday through Thursday. And then like Friday and Saturday are kind of more for takeout, for fun food, for, the indulgent stuff. And that to me feels like a good balance. That feels kind of like an 80-20 balance. And I'm here for that. So I would say within the last like 5 years since, 2021 to now, call it, I have really operated on that schedule. And on top of that, I also have now found like a consistent workout routine and something that actually truly works for me. If you want to hear more about my health journey, again, from a very like chill, relatable perspective, I don't talk about like counting calories or weighing myself or any of that kind of stuff because honestly, that stuff triggers me personally. I talk about that in episode 88, How to Be Your Healthiest Self. So you can go listen to that if you want to hear more about like my fitness journey, my journey with taking care of my body in that way. And for me, I try to follow like some general advice, right? Like eating more protein, eating less sugar, just very general stuff like that. But I don't overanalyze and I don't get too in my head about it because I don't necessarily have a reason to do that and stress myself out. So for me, all of this, like establishing these building blocks, establishing a weekly routine where I am actually cooking and I'm buying whole foods and things like that as much as I can, like that is all kind of the beginning, and I can continue to grow and add and learn from here, especially as my body continues to like grow and change just as I age naturally. Okay, so how did I like officially start learning how to cook? Again, I would really say like simple experimentation is how I really started. So again, if I think about back to my college days, just like a box of pasta and a jar of sauce, just starting to experiment a little bit more. How much pasta do I actually need to put in the pot? How much sauce do I actually need from the jar? Because I used to just cook everything and then that would be like way too much and the ratios wouldn't even be right. So just little things like every time I did it, taking a mental note, like, okay, I used 2/3 of the box of pasta, and because the jar was small, I actually did use the whole jar of sauce. Great. Now, could I also like add Italian seasoning next time? Could I add a little bit of garlic, like crushed garlic, and toss it around to give it more flavor? Should I add a little drizzle of olive oil? Just tiny little experimentations, things that are low stakes that you know aren't going to change like the makeup of the food itself, but might just be interesting to like experiment with and try the seasonings for. I follow this YouTuber named Tara Michelle who my friend Floor put me onto, and I was blown away by this because I've just like never thought of it before. She made the Trader Joe's frozen chicken soup dumplings, and then she put like the chili onion crunch on top of it and drizzled it with soy sauce. And I'm like, what the heck? So I literally bought a jar of chili crunch. I think I might even try that for lunch today just to see what the vibe is. And I'm like, wait a minute, I could have been doing this the whole time. Like, you know, you don't always just have to take things exactly as they are. You can like figure out what flavors you like, little things like that, and continue to iterate on the things that you already know how to do. I will also say one thing that did really help me learn how to cook was doing HelloFresh meal boxes. And there are so many like food service options out there. You know, you could do like Blue Apron, Green Chef. There's a lot of these meal kits at home that can be helpful. I actually worked with HelloFresh on a campaign, and then I literally like became a customer after that. And I do still have my HelloFresh subscription. You can keep it active for as long as you want. I just don't always get boxes because, you know, sometimes it is cheaper to get groceries myself. Sometimes I'm traveling. But for weeks when I really don't know what to do, like I just have the box come, truly. And what I like about this is it's very simple instructions. You can see when you're picking out the meals exactly how long it's going to take. And the recipe card splits it by like prep time versus cook time. So you can see exactly how long it'll really take you to do it. And the nice thing about this is it does save you time in the grocery store because everything comes prepackaged, the exact amount of everything you need. So there's less food waste. Like it doesn't make financial sense to do it every single week. However, every once in a while, it really comes in clutch. And again, like I think that it is so nice to just like have the recipe right in front of you and to see picture by picture, like step by step, exactly what recipe you're doing. And then one hot tip from that, actually, I haven't gone through my binder in a while, but one hot tip I would say is to save all of your recipes because they came in like a printed out card. And I literally made a binder of all of them. So even if I am not ordering a HelloFresh box, I can still like reuse the recipes. You know, I could flip through and be like, oh, this was really great and easy, just make sure that I can get all the ingredients from the grocery store and then I'm good to go. So I do actually really find that helpful. And I also, like I said, I worked with them, and then I did have a friend who worked at HelloFresh and I was able to use like her code for kind of an extra discount. So for a while, it really wasn't that much more to be like ordering the HelloFresh boxes each week. I do know the prices have gone up. I do know things are crazy. I might even still have a code active. If I do, I will put it in the description because that really was a way that I did learn how to cook more. Okay, and then another thing that I kind of referenced already, but that does really help me is to do a rule of three meal where it's like, okay, you've got a meat, a starch, and a veggie. And this can turn into so many different dishes. Like if you're just picturing them as kind of separate things on the plate, I'll tell you what we're having for dinner tonight actually. This falls in this category. We're going to do salmon, then we're going to do pasta arrabbiata, which I get from Trader Joe's, and it's the frozen one. And I actually find that when I split that bag between Andrew and I, it's like the perfect side. So I wouldn't, one bag is not enough for two people to share as just the meal itself, but it makes a great side. And then I do some frozen broccoli in the air fryer. So that's what we're having literally for dinner tonight: salmon, pasta, broccoli, meat, starch, veggie. Another one that I've done a lot is just like regular grilled chicken and some couscous or orzo and zucchini. Like that's another one you could do. And I'm picturing those as like three separate things on a plate, but you could also do like shrimp mixed in with couscous mixed in with asparagus. Now that's another thing. And even though it's all combined together, that's more like a bowl. You can still take that and run with it. You could do that Mexican style. You could do some ground beef seasoned with Mexican spice, white rice, and then put some roasted bell peppers on top. So if you're ever in doubt, just think of those three things. And that I feel like is something that you can meal prep and save, to use more throughout the week that will actually reheat pretty well. Okay, and then there are also a couple of cookbooks that I feel like have helped me cook too. And they all are kind of like, how do I explain this? They're kind of all like cookbooks written by millennials. And this is just something that, again, I felt like people were kind of speaking my language through these cookbooks and made it easier for me to understand like exactly what I was getting myself into and what I was actually cooking. So the first cookbook that I actually got back when I was working at Nylon, because I remember we featured it in the magazine, was the Hot Mess Kitchen cookbook. And that one's so funny. There's recipes in there like bounced check burrito. Like I literally remember that from 10 years ago because it's such a catchy name. And what I liked about Hot Mess Kitchen was the ingredients were really cheap, like hence bounce check burrito. It's like a really cheap way to make a great tasting burrito at home. And there were just like really fun stories associated with all of the recipes too. So that always made it a little more engaging to me. As a little sidebar, one big like point of conversation I've noticed in the blogging and influencing community is that food bloggers like take too long to just get to the recipe on their blog posts and they tell stories about the foods. And to that I say, there's usually a jump to the recipe button. So what are you complaining about? You get this recipe for free. They make money off of the ads. You don't have to read the story if you don't want to. For recipes that I've made a couple of times, I do like to go and read the story and be like, when did we first make this? What's the origin? But that's just me, okay? I am a storyteller at heart, so I think that's why I tend to gravitate towards enjoying the stories associated with all the meals. Okay, another cookbook that I feel like was really helpful in the making slightly healthier swaps option category is the Dude Diet. And I like this cookbook because it is very classic, like I would almost call it game day eats. If you were to think of like Super Bowl snacks, like things that the guys want to eat if they get together and go out to watch a game at a bar type food that you can make yourself at home with like a slightly healthier swapper option. So just to give a couple of examples, they had a nachos recipe that used pita chips instead of tortilla chips. They did a shepherd's pie that involved ground turkey and whipped cauliflower instead of ground beef and mashed potatoes. But it all still tasted good. And again, there are some things that will never be better than the original. Like, was that shepherd's pie ever better than what the original shepherd's pie would be? No, probably not. But just like those little tiny healthy swaps. And I feel like that is a good one for someone who feels like they are just always in the cycle of like, but it's never as good as like what's out at the bar. It's like, it could be like 85% as good though and be a lot healthier. So I appreciate that cookbook for that reason. Okay, and then the other one that I feel like I use the most is the Trader Joe's 5 items or less cookbooks. And I own both of them. They're not that expensive. You can get them on Amazon. But if you want to kind of like test drive some of the recipes before you actually buy the cookbooks, there is an Instagram account. I will link all of these cookbooks in the show notes and also the Instagram account for Trader Joe's 5 items or less. And this is genius. Like, it helps keep the costs down, it helps simplify your trips. This is so smart for anyone who's like new to cooking. I actually got this for my friend for Christmas last year because she just got married and they just moved into a new space. And I was like, this is the thing that I wish I had in the beginning of my like, okay, homemaking, cooking, married gal kind of journey. But it truly can work for anybody. And again, I feel like the portions make sense and there's a lot of stuff in there that would be really easy to, if you're cooking for just yourself, to like make for dinner one night and then reheat for lunch the next day. And anything that cuts down on my decision making throughout the week of like, okay, what's for breakfast? What's for lunch? What's for dinner? You know, 3 times 7 is what, 21? I should not be doing live math with no calculator in my head right now, but I think that that's right. That's 21 meals a week that you have to figure out, like, what am I having for this meal? So if you can answer one of those with the same meal, now you're down to 20 decisions, and so on and so forth. So that's one way to think about like planning meals and figuring out recipes and stuff like that. And when I was putting together this outline, I was trying to think like, was there really a point where the switch flipped and I was like, oh, suddenly I don't like hate cooking. If anything, I kind of even don't mind it and or occasionally could look forward to cooking. Again, I think it kind of goes with a lot of different things, but I think that most of this appreciation and like better understanding of cooking has really happened in the last 5 years. And I'm 31, so that means this really only started kicking in around 26. So do with that information what you will. But again, I was really thinking I just have such a deep, deep appreciation for my health, especially after the pandemic. I'm sure that I'm not the only one who feels that way, but to really like come to terms with that and like be conscious about it is something that has influenced how I like to think about preparing the food that goes into like my body and Andrew's body. And I also think I started following creators who would occasionally like share meals and recipes. I don't follow too many outright cooking accounts aside from Carissa Stevens, who's my sister-in-law. So obviously I have to shout out her account and all of her recipes. And my friend Rebecca, who runs the Practical Kitchen. We are internet friends. We actually have never met in person, which is kind of weird, but she has incredible, simple recipes. And she also shares like a lot of one person little mini like focaccia breads and stuff like that. So if you want to like partake in all of that stuff and you're cooking for yourself, I feel like she has a lot of recipes for that. But I also have noticed that even for some of the lifestyle creators who I follow, particularly on YouTube, like I was saying with Tara Michelle, it's like even she sometimes will just cook like shredded chicken, sweet potatoes, and some kind of like broccoli or side that just looks so good. And I'm like, oh, why didn't I think of that? And it's like sometimes these things don't occur to you unless they're right in front of you. So I feel like I have been more willingly consuming food content in that way and enjoying seeing all of the different ideas that people have for recipes and things like that. So I will link everyone who I just mentioned in the show notes too. And I also kind of started romanticizing cooking more. Like, I don't know if we're over the era of like romanticize your life and like main character energy, but that is an era that I don't ever want to leave. Maybe it was a little 2022-ish, but I'm keeping those vibes going into 2026 because for me also like just the relaxing thought of like not having to be staring at a screen, which is what I feel like I do 80% of the week. And cooking is also a chance to just detach a little bit, like set the vibe, set the tone. So let's talk a little bit about how I do that too. I do like the idea of making cooking a sensory experience and just making it something that you actually enjoy. So a couple of ways that I do this are number one, sometimes I like to put on a comfort show on the TV in the background or listen to a podcast. And the reason that I feel like this still helps me detach from screen time is with a comfort show, which is something like Gilmore Girls or Gossip Girl that I've seen a million times. I don't have to actively be staring at the screen while I'm cooking. It's kind of just like people keeping me company in the background. And also where my kitchen is and where the TV is in the living room, I can't actually like, I don't have really a perfect eye line to it. So again, it really is just like a little bit of background noise, a little bit of like comforting chatter. Maybe that's what this podcast is for you. Maybe you're listening to this right now if you're cooking. And if you are, comment like a cooking emoji or something in the comments so that I know that you're listening while you're cooking, because that is so meta of us. I also love on Spotify looking up like a cooking playlist, and there are honestly so many of them to choose from, which is one of the things I love about Spotify, like truly a playlist for every occasion. So you can just type in like cooking playlist. I've also typed in Italian music. Like you could look up music from the cuisine that you're cooking. Like if you're making Mexican, you could look up Mexican music, Portuguese music. Like there's so many different ways you could go with that to kind of set the vibe and set the tone. But obviously, my favorite way to cook is when Andrew's sitting at the kitchen counter and maybe a bottle of wine has been opened, have a little sip of wine while you're cooking, get to chat, some music in the background. That's definitely my favorite. That, again, is kind of a rarity, especially like during the work week and specifically during marathon training season. But I foresee a lot of that happening over the summer, which I'm definitely looking forward to. And you know what else this episode really got me thinking about is honestly like the mental load of grocery shopping and how it is actually a lot of work to put together like a list for the week, to keep things up to date, like in your fridge and your pantry. I do try to do like quarterly fridge and pantry clear outs where it's like, okay, if something has been expired for like a month, I usually catch it before it's too late. But sometimes things slip through the cracks. Like when we moved in September, I was finding some stuff in the pantry that I was like, how long has this been here? Like, why did we not discover this sooner? Like, what's going on? And sometimes that's just how it is. Especially like groceries are so expensive. Like, it's literally so annoying. Someone did a TikTok, actually. If I can find it, I'll link it in the show notes. Someone did a TikTok yesterday that I was watching, and he was like, this is how much things should cost. And I fully agreed with everything that he said. It's not always easy to figure out what to prioritize, but I try to, like, when in doubt, get little extra things that I do feel like make the difference in the taste of a dish that don't cost too much money. So that could be seasonings, that could be just like a lemon, to have fresh squeezed lemon juice. That to me is something that is so special and really elevates a dish and is super inexpensive. Even like adding a shallot. I made homemade pasta last night and I cut up a shallot and tossed it in there, and I do feel like that changes the flavor profile. So little things like that, you know? And I feel like this is common knowledge, but when grocery shopping, obviously prepared foods versus like the raw food or the food in its original state, those packaged and prepared versions are always going to cost more. So just as a couple of examples, you know, getting from Trader Joe's like the pre-cooked grilled chicken that you can use for different sandwiches and stuff is always going to cost more than if you just bought chicken breast and cooked it yourself. Same thing with like Trader Joe's also does sliced fruit. So you can get a container of sliced mango. That's always going to be more than just buying the mango and slicing it yourself. So a lot of food shopping, I've noticed too, is really like a time or money trade-off. Like what is more important to you in that given week? So for me, like even on the menu this week, I decided that I'm going to make some homemade chicken sandwiches for us for lunch, like on the days that Andrew's working from home this week. So I got a bunch of ciabatta rolls. I got the pre-made grilled chicken so that I don't actually have to cook chicken like in the middle of the day or even remember to meal prep it like tonight after I make dinner already. That just simplifies that part of the meal, and the rest of the meal already featured things that were prepared already or that won't take much time, like slicing tomatoes. I bought a thing of pesto that I'm going to like smooth on the ciabatta buns, and a little bit of the unexpected cheddar cheese. That is just like such an easy thing to throw together versus having to like prepare the chicken in the first place. But if I were doing something like that for dinner where I have a little more time after work, like not in the middle of the workday when I'm probably in a flow already, then maybe I'll cook the chicken myself. So those are kind of the ways I think about those trade-offs. Also, can we just, grocery shopping in a city is so hard. If you live in the suburbs, you don't realize how good you have it on the grocery front, okay? Huge sweeping aisles, large grocery carts. You can easily find what you're looking for. You're not like bumping into other people. City grocery stores are literally like going to the Hunger Games, I swear. And that's one of the reasons that I try to go like either first thing on Monday mornings or like during lunch sometime during the week. And obviously I have the flexibility to do that, and I'm grateful for that. If you go to Trader Joe's on a Sunday at like 10 a.m., Godspeed. I wish you luck with that. Not to mention the fact that we don't have cars. So you're like schlepping all your bags either like 20 blocks back home or on the subway or having to call an Uber. Like, there's a lot of logistics that go into city grocery shopping. I usually just suck it up and my shoulders end up hurting a lot when I do my walks to the grocery stores. But, I'm just, okay, I just need to complain about that for a minute. If you live in a city and you shop at grocery stores, you understand what I'm talking about. And also, I do think when you're kind of meal planning and thinking of stuff for the week, like trying to think of ingredients that can overlap for the week, but that result in different finished products of a meal. So, even I was thinking like along the lines for this week or next week, I got a little thing of pico de gallo from Trader Joe's, and I could use that for carne asada steak bowls, and I could also use that for shrimp tacos. And even though those are both under like the Mexican food umbrella, you're still getting two different dishes out of it, and you're still getting, for the most part, two different like flavor profiles. So trying to think of things like that also can help save money with grocery shopping and also eliminate decisions. I really do feel like decision fatigue is one of the reasons that people hate cooking, because having to make decisions about what you're having, what time you want to serve this, which day of the week you're going to have that, will this reheat for lunch this day? Like, there is actually a lot that goes into it. And the more that you can cut those down, the less stressed out about grocery shopping you're going to be. I also think finding your kitchen tools that you use and love every single week is really helpful. Like, I know I have my favorite spatula. I have a lemon juicer that I really like. I have this random little like avocado slicer tool that I feel like my mom got me a couple of years ago, where you can like twist out the pit with it, scoop out the avocado and slice it. And the knife is like not too sharp, so it won't usually cut through the avocado skin or cut you in any way. And also my air fryer. Like, that is the one kitchen mini appliance that I actually feel like I use almost every single day. That has been completely worth it. So I can link those things in the show notes if you want to check any of them out. If you have any things that you use in that category that you love, let me know what they are in the comments too. I'm super curious. And I was also trying to think about just like, what are some pantry staples that I always try to keep in the pantry? I love like a quality olive oil. I love buying olive oil from cute local shops and things like that. I still have one from the Cape May olive oil company that I went to for my cousin's bachelorette, and I love that one. My aunt and uncle got us some really nice ones as like a housewarming gift. I love Malden sea salt flakes. I feel like they elevate so many dishes, and it feels so nice to just like do a little sprinkle of that flaky, nice sea salt on top of things. Obviously, seasonings. Trader Joe's has a lot of fun ones. I also try to keep just like an Italian seasoning, obviously salt and pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, red pepper, chili flakes, things along those lines. And then, things like chicken broth, orzo, or couscous, that always is like a helpful base of a dish, or could be a helpful side of a dish if you need. Chickpeas and beans, just like things along those lines. And I also feel like when in doubt, it's nice to just like know off the top of your head like 3 easy weeknight meals that you can make like in your sleep that you can just replicate super simply at any time. For me, those are literally what we're having tonight that I told you already: salmon, pasta arrabbiata, and broccoli. Also, I love sheet pan sausage and peppers. That to me is so easy. The ingredients will keep in the fridge or on the counter pretty well. And I also do a bag of the Trader Joe's like frozen jasmine rice on the side of that. So simple. Literally like cut everything up, throw it on a pan, olive oil, garlic powder, salt and pepper, in the oven, 400 degrees, 18 minutes. Done. And also, a couple years ago, I asked Andrew, what's your favorite thing that I make for dinner? Gave me the most boy answer in the world. Chicken quesadillas, he said. And I said, you know what? I need to remember that, because when in doubt, I'm making chicken quesadillas, because that is so easy to do. I get the thinly sliced chicken breast from the store, shredded cheese, the tortillas. Like, that's literally only 3 ingredients. So I'm doing even 2 layers less than the Trader Joe's 5 items or less cookbook right there. not including toppings, obviously, which sour cream, salsa, and hot sauce, those are like always in the fridge for me. I'll have to ask Andrew again what his favorite thing that I make lately is, because hopefully it's the homemade pasta. I'm that's a journey, but I am trying to get better at it. And actually, we can talk about that because the next little category list that I have for this episode is stuff I've made that I'm really proud of. And I do think homemade pasta is up there. This is something that took me a while to get to. We actually took a cooking class last summer in Italy where we learned how to make pasta. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to make homemade pasta all the time. 9 months went by, but here I am finally. And I also got this pasta making machine for free because our neighbors were getting rid of stuff. And it was like brand new, basically in the box, like had been used one time. This is like when I look up pasta maker, when I just Google it, this is like the one that comes up. I'm sure it's on everyone's like wedding registry and stuff like that. I do actually recommend it. It's super easy to use, very, very simple. I can link it in the show notes. And I followed a recipe from a girl I follow on Instagram and TikTok named Alessandra. I'm sure I've sung her praises on here before, but she just makes the most satisfying videos. So I actually took her recipe for pasta dough and I halved it. Halved it. Why am I having such a hard time right now? Halved it. I took her recipe and I cut it in half, if that makes sense. So I do 1¼ cups of 00 flour, which is like the finest version of flour that you can buy, and 2 room temperature eggs. I have been buying large, but I feel like if I did extra large, the ratio might end up working out better. So I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. But this past Sunday was my 3rd week in a row making homemade pasta. I would love to like make this a tradition in our home, like make it like the Sunday meal is always a homemade pasta of some kind. And I think I can make this happen. So it's been good so far. A couple of attempts have ended up tasting a tiny bit more like ramen to me versus pasta. I think I might need to thin out the dough even a little bit more, maybe try some other recipes, but it's all been edible so far and it's all been pretty good. So that has been exciting. Okay, and then a couple of other favorite meals, and I'll give you the sources for all of these and I'll link what I can in the show notes. So from the Dude Diet cookbook that I was telling you about, the chicken enchiladas. So chicken is a swap for beef enchiladas, and these are delicious. When we've had like couples over at our apartment for dinner, this is what I make because it serves everybody and there's always still leftovers. So if you're having a small group of like 4 people, I feel like it's the perfect meal for that. I also love the beef lo mein from the Trader Joe's 5 items or less cookbook. So for that one, I get the shaved beef steak, then I get the Thai wheat noodles, and I get the frozen stir fry veggies, and I also get the General Tso's sauce. And that one, like again, 4 ingredients, literally so easy. Always so much food, like for the 2 of us. I always feel like I am well fed after I eat that. Okay, current weeknight meal fixation is these chicken meatballs over orzo. And again, this is like, if I had seen this recipe 5 years ago, I would look at it and be like, that's way too many steps, not doing it. But like the payoff of this one is so good that I don't mind cooking it. And again, I feel like if you find stuff that you really love, it makes sense to keep cooking it. So this one I found on Pinterest, and it's on the Cochina Republic blog. I will link that one below. Really, really good. Next up is a shrimp couscous, and I found this on a Substack actually, but like through Google search, I'm pretty sure. So the Substack is Samantha Harrington's Substack, and the recipe is kind of like a shrimp scampi couscous, which I have really only had shrimp scampi over like angel hair or kind of fettuccine style pasta. So to put it with couscous, it I would say is not like the most filling meal, but if you want something that feels healthy and tastes delicious, I do really like this one. I also really like pasta amatriciana. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I found this one on Allison Roman's Substack, but I think a content creator posted about it first. I think that's actually how I found it. It may have been Michelle and Aline on their YouTube channel. And I like this one because this is also kind of like a DIY sauce situation where she has you buy 128-ounce can of whole peeled tomatoes crushed, and that just to me always like tastes so good when you get to like make your own sauce in that way. Okay, and then the last one I wanted to mention is these cilantro lime steak bowls. I found these on the Homesmad blog. also through Pinterest. And oh my God. So, this is one of my favorite things that I've made in recent history. And it also helped me learn how to cook flank steak. And again, if you had told me like 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, like, oh, girl, you're cooking steak, I would have been like, huh? Like, that is so scary to me. What are you talking about? Because steak is expensive. And if you mess it up, it's really disappointing. And actually, I will confess something here, which is that I kind of did mess this one up once. And it was actually kind of really upsetting to me. I tried not to like flip out too much in front of Andrew, but I was actually just mad at myself because the thing about steak is you really need to make sure that you cut. Hold on, now I'm gonna get it wrong again. This is why cooking is hard sometimes. Let me read what the recipe says so that I don't tell you the wrong thing. Slice the steak against the grain. Okay, so one time that I made this, I don't know if I wasn't paying attention or what was going on, but I sliced it with the grain and it really did kind of ruin the texture of the steak. And that was so upsetting to me, especially because everything else was like perfect in it. And again, I will link this recipe for you guys. Everything in it, like I like recipes where it's really easy for me to understand the ingredients. It's a lot of whole foods and just like simple seasonings. Those to me are just ones that I am going to want to repeat for forever. Like, can you see this? If you're watching on YouTube, I had to show you a picture. It's literally so good. And for each little recipe, you can modify slightly. Like, I'm not a big fan of corn, so I think I swap in some roasted bell peppers that I season with the everything but the elote seasoning from Trader Joe's. Black beans, you could also swap for pinto beans if you want to. And yeah, you can really like DIY and put together and put your own touch on different recipes too. There are some recipes that I found maybe like 3 to 4 years ago that started out as one thing. And now when I cook them, I do a couple of things differently. Maybe I've changed some ingredients and now it's kind of like, oh, okay, I kind of took that and made it into my version of this recipe. And to leave you off with a couple of tips in the kitchen and with cooking and meal planning and all the things, I think that, again, limiting decision making and finding stuff that you really like that's tasty and healthy and is repeatable for weeknights when you're like, what the hell do I cook? That is half the battle, honestly. And once I've kind of figured out some go to recipes in my weeknight meal rotation, many of which I've talked about in today's episode, and I've managed to kind of stagger them throughout the week, like, maybe one week, okay, we're not doing salmon this week, I'll swap it in for chicken. Maybe sausage and peppers is like an every other week kind of meal, even though it's so stupid easy. I feel like I could literally make it all the time because I feel like weeknight dinner is honestly the hardest thing to figure out. Like a fun, big Saturday or Sunday weekend meal is one thing. Like, breakfast is pretty easy to figure out. Honestly, I didn't even really touch too much on breakfast in this episode because I feel like I'm not an expert. I do a lot of like yogurt parfaits with yogurt, the kind granola and raspberries. I also love the Trader Joe's breakfast burritos, but those are like a once a week or like just on a weekend type of treat because they are definitely not good for you, but they are delicious. I also love a bagel. I love like an avocado toast. I want to maybe try to make some more dishes with eggs and stuff, but honestly, I've been pretty boring in the breakfast department lately, so I feel like I didn't have much to share on that front. Also, I would say, like, just take little mental notes of things as you go. I know for, like, the chicken and orzo recipe, the chicken meatball and orzo recipe, I should say, that I just mentioned, one thing about that I noticed is the first time that I made it, it had me use 2 cups of chicken broth, and I felt like the orzo was not totally fully cooked, even though a lot of the broth had absorbed, so I kind of just made a mental note to myself, like, okay, next time, why don't I add an extra 1/4 cup of chicken broth and see how it goes? Or if it still needs a little bit more, even like, okay, an extra 1/2 cup of chicken broth and see how it goes. Like, oh, next time I want to let this simmer a little longer so all the flavors really combine. Like, oh, I should make sure that next time I get out the pepper mill and get like some nice, fresh black pepper grated on top of that. Like, that really makes a difference in the flavor. Just taking like those little mental notes and, like I said, making tweaks to recipes to make your version of them and keep track of them somewhere. I actually am trying to start to keep track of a lot of this in Notion just so that I always have like a little library that I can go to. And also just in case you want to like teach someone how to make something, or maybe I'm running late from an event or something and Andrew's hungry and he wants to start cooking dinner because I'm taking forever to get home, like to be able to just quickly and easily shoot him over a little note or share the recipe with the instructions. All of that is helpful, I think, just for like communication and making sure that everyone ultimately gets fed. And like I said, again, collect your favorite recipes. Maybe it's from people who you follow on Instagram or YouTube. Maybe it's from Substacks. Maybe it's from Pinterest. Like I said, I've got a little page in my Notion hub, literally just called recipes, where I save links to the recipes that I reference like every single week. Also, when in doubt, ask your friends what they're cooking lately. This has been one of my favorite things to ask my friends lately, and I feel like they've given me a lot of really good ideas just for simple things, like maybe things that I haven't thought of lately. And I feel like because everyone also has their own, like everyone has a different living situation. Like some of my friends are married with kids, some of my friends are single and cooking for themselves, some of my friends live with roommates. I always enjoy hearing like, what's your guys like weekly meal rotation? What are you guys cooking? Did your roommate have a good recipe to recommend? Like, did your partner get a recipe that he inherited from his grandmother? Like, there's always someone with an idea for what to cook. And it doesn't always have to be you. So definitely be sure to check out all the resources in the show notes. Like I said, I linked a bunch of recipes down there for you guys. And ask around and look on Pinterest and just find stuff that you love and that sounds like, this would be so tasty if I made this tonight. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Again, one of the things I love about the podcast is it really does give me an opportunity to talk about topics that don't always fit into like my typical content pillars or niche. So I am by no means like a cooking content creator, but I am really proud of everything I've learned over the years. I'm proud of myself for looking into making healthy meals. I'm proud of myself for like every time I cook, just learning and getting maybe like 1% better with each meal that I make. I always say the same thing about content too. Like the more you do it, the more you learn, the more you can keep improving. So I appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. If this gave you some weeknight dinner inspiration, send me pictures of what you're eating. Like send me a DM on Instagram, hit me up. I would love to see. And I'll talk to you guys again next week.